My name is Doris Houston. I'm an associate professor and director of the Center for Child Welfare and Adoption Studies at Illinois State University. And along with my colleague, Dr. Danica Aban, who wants to wave to everyone. So we'd like to welcome you here. This is the first of 3 in a series that will be bringing community members together, and it's with the focus of healing Illinois, and our particular focus, because this came out of a grant, is where we've been, where we are now, and where we are going, the state of child welfare in the Black community. So today we have members from the Bloomington Normal as well as Peoria community. We want to thank Jerry Murray, who offered her space here at LSSI Lutheran Social Services, Inc. And the Town Hall is being sponsored by the Black Administrators in Child Welfare of Illinois, as well as the Chicago Association of Black Social Workers, in partnership with DCFS, the Office of Racial Equity Practice, the Illinois Permanency Enhancement Project, which you'll learn more about, many of you already are aware, and the School of Social Work at ISU. So as I was preparing this morning, I began to reflect back in the early days of child welfare in 1964. How many of us were around in 1964? That was the year that DCFS was established as the first cabinet-level state child welfare agency. So this Illinois, for all of the criticisms, we have been at the forefront of child welfare as well as other areas. But during the height of the civil rights era, who knows the name Patrick Moynihan, Daniel Patrick Moynihan? So during that same time that DCFS was established, Moynihan published his historic report in 1965 called The Culture of Poverty. The report recommended deep reductions in funding for Black and other marginalized communities because, in his words, such communities were considered hopeless and caught in a tangle of pathology due to maladaptive social behaviors, values, and beliefs. And this was the U.S. Department of Labor. Moynihan denied the existence, though, of institutionalized bias and racism as contributing factors to the disparities we see in our schools, our government agencies, within child welfare, criminal justice, etc. Fast forward to 2009, Dr. Lynn Todman developed a speaker series entitled Community Grand Rounds, Healing the Trauma of Racism. So recognizing that many of these so-called ills that Moynihan talked about, really they were rooted in systemic racism and frankly colonialism. So Todman described the structural disadvantages that communities of color experience as being operationalized by social exclusion. So exclusion from opportunities, exclusion from economics, exclusion from high quality education. And so Todman also explained that some institutional structures have embedded in them historical attitudes, values, and beliefs about minoritized people that becomes then embodied in laws, policies, and institutional behaviors. Does any of that sound familiar? But in spite of these barriers designed to prevent Black communities and communities of color from thriving, Black and BIPOC leaders and everyday citizens, along with their white progressive allies, have continued to break down these barriers through communities of change. And organizations, many that I can't mention here, but certainly the NAACP, and we have our president of the Bloomington Normal NAACP here, Linda Foster, the National Urban League. Anyone here representing the Urban League? 100 Black Men, the National Council of Negro Women, Black Greek organizations. I think I heard some rumblings of many Deltas in the house. Yeah. Is that true? Yeah. There you go. But you know, actually when communities of color, and particularly Black communities, were left out of those formalized resources, it has been our Greek organizations and other advocacy groups within our communities who have really led the way in supporting our children, our families, etc. And then, of course, today we have the Black administrators in child welfare, as well as the Chicago Association of Black Social Workers, who've really been doing great things in our communities, and as a result of their work, we're here today. So without further delay, we're going to do some introductions of those who have made this event possible. And then after that, they'll provide an overview of Healing Illinois, which was funded by a grant that Jackie Bright will tell you about. We'll talk about why we're here and a call to action. We want everyone here to leave out with the next step, our charge on what we plan to do moving forward. So again, I want to thank you for being here. And now I'll open it up or introduce Jackie Bright, the president of the Black Administrators in Child Welfare. And refer to your program booklet. We do have bios for individuals who are our honored guests. Thank you, Jackie. Let's give her a round
of applause. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Bright, and I am the president of the Illinois chapter of Black Administrators in Child Welfare. We are so excited about having these town hall meetings. BACW, in collaboration and partnership with the Chicago Association of Black Social Workers, decided that, it's time to really address racial inequities in the child welfare system. And luckily, we were able to discover a grant that we applied for and we received and we targeted Central Illinois, because based upon the data, that's where the need really is, not Chicago. Although Chicago has issues, I'm not undermining that, but there are some serious issues here in Central Illinois that we felt that we need to start with. So on behalf of BACW, I want to welcome all of you to our very first of 3 town hall meetings. We will have 2 additional meetings, one in Springfield and one in Champaign-Urbana. So we're covering the whole gamut of Central Illinois. I want to tell you a little bit about the BACW. We were organized here in Illinois in 2014. And one of the main reasons why we wanted to organize was to look at the disproportionality in the child welfare system, as well as strengthening Black families to avoid them from entering into the system. We're committed in doing that by working with local communities throughout the state. Although our hub is in Chicago, but we are working throughout the state. And we are continuing to have programs, events like these to address those issues of disproportionality and disparate treatment. That's another big piece. And with that, we're hoping that the outcomes that we receive, all of us as a village, will be developing and strengthening our Black families and trying to do whatever is necessary to keep them out of the child welfare system. Today is really going to be a really special day, because it's going to be a day where we want you all to talk to us. And we want you all to engage in dialogue, share your thoughts about change, what is needed in Central Region, okay? What is needed in Central Illinois to make significant changes in the child welfare system? This is a safe space. I don't work for DCFS, okay? I don't work for any private agency. So whatever you say today stays here, okay? But keep in mind, if you're saying some things that we can take back and make some significant changes, we're gonna do that, okay? So I'm saying that to say, please feel free to talk to us about some of the problems that you're experiencing as it relates to racial inequities. So today you're going to have dialogue. You're going to build connections across systems. We have, as Dr. Houston was saying, we have various people here today. Talk to each other because we can support each other. And we have so many strengths in this room today. So, you know, together we want you all to advocate around equity, around organizations really having a voice in the child welfare system, because you are the community, you can make a change. And we're going to be successful today. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague and co-sponsor of Racial Healing Illinois, who also is going to really give you a little bit more substance in terms of what this grant really entails. You know, it was just wonderful and awesome that we were able to get this grant for Central Region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tiffany Johnson, who is the president of Chicago Association of Black Social Workers.
Good morning, everyone. As she said, I'm Dr. Tiffany Johnson, the president of the Chicago Association of Black Social Workers, and hopefully my name tag won't fall off. I won't repeat anything that Jackie stated, but the Black Administrator of Child Welfare had recently completed its second annual Child Welfare Leadership Institute in Bloomington last year. And from that institute, we learned about the really significant issues that were being faced by the child welfare staff and families in this area. And we had hoped that we would develop like mentorship and leadership opportunities from the Bloomington area to Chicago. But what we learned was that what the staff who attended really needed was mentorship and peer support. So rather than becoming a mentorship group, it became a peer support group. And they're still meeting today. So when I came across this grant, I thought it would be completely appropriate for us to, although we're in Chicago, to bring this work here to the Central area, and not Central Illinois area. And I know that there are other organizations who also received this grant, but our focus is on the work that we know, our expertise, child welfare, and that which we believe that we can ultimately benefit. Excuse me. So our Healing Illinois grants will provide education and training, community engagement, mentorship and leadership opportunities, collaboration with community stakeholders, research and data analysis, which is why we had to tap into ISU to participate with us. And in addition to the 3 town hall meetings that we'll be hosting from here to Springfield, we'll also be having the 3rd annual Child Welfare Leadership Institute in June of this year. So we are still seeking applicants for that as well. It is a 3-day from June 26th through the 28th. So if you are interested, you can see any one of us in the front probably about the Leadership Institute. I can send the link if you have Google or Gmail, but I can also send you a Word document for the application as well. So today, as we gather with heavy hearts to address the state of child welfare in the Black community in Central Illinois, we come together in this place. We acknowledge the challenges and struggles that our children and families face in our community. This meeting is a crucial step towards understanding the issues, finding solutions, and healing the wounds that have affected our children and families. It is a time for us to come together, listen to each other's voices, and work towards building a brighter future for the next generation. The well-being of our children and families is a collective responsibility, and it is our duty to ensure that they are safe, supported, and thriving. As we delve into the discussions today, let us approach them with empathy, compassion, and a commitment to positive change. I urge each of you to actively engage, share your thoughts, and contribute to the dialogue. Together, we can create a community where every family is valued, protected, and given the opportunity to succeed. Thank you for being here and for your dedication to the well-being of our children and families. Let's work together toward a brighter and healthier future for all our community. Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce you to Dejanay Brown. the Director of the DCFS Office of Racial Equity Practice.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Jackie, thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your introduction as it talks about why we're here. Today, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be a part of this collaborative. I direct the Office of Racial Equity Practice, where we look at the disproportionality of our Black children in our system. There are a number of different things I think the department wants to do in order to address it, but we can't do that without the community. And so this space today is a very important space for us to learn and hear from us. I heard Jackie say she's not DCFS. I'm DCFS, but this is still a space. This is still a safe space. Where we learn, where we get an opportunity to learn from the community what's best needed. And if you ask my team, well, I always tell you, you have to see what the data tells us. Where do we land? What are we doing? In not this particular area, but in the central region, we'll be rolling out the Bias-Free Child Removal Act, which is similar to blind removal. I don't know if you heard about that in other places, New York, Michigan and LA. But this is where we remove demographic information that tells the identity of a child or a family to make a determination of whether or not we would still make a decision to bring that child into care. And so we're rolling that out this year. Looking forward to having great outcomes as a result. My colleague, esteemed colleague who will be talking later, always says we can't do anything in a silo, that we have to build more things around that. So the bias-free removal won't work by itself. There's a number of things that we'll need to do in order to make that successful, and it's going to include our community voice to be a part of that. So I'm glad to be here today. I'm here and open for any questions you may have later on that comes up about the department. I have a team here, so I'm glad to see my team is here. Team, can you raise your hand? There you go. I would like to acknowledge them because when I started doing this work at the department, I was a one-woman show. And if we really want to put support behind the work, and that's what I tell the folks that were in charge, our leaders, you have to give me staff. We need to, they want us to do things, fix this. We're not going to give you any help to do that. We just want you to do that. But I really had a great leadership team that understood the need and was able to extend our team. So we have someone, Lindia is our Central Region Race Equity Administrator. Lindia, would you raise your hand? So she's the person that's dedicated to this particular region. If there's anything that comes up, supports and how the office can be of assistance, she is your person, but we're all here. We work as a team. As you see, they're all here today from all over the state. So I think we're glad to be here today, and I'm glad that you were able to be a partner in this work, and we look forward to a successful outcome as a result. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And boy, how far we have come that the department is funding and sees the need and the importance of having an Office of Racial Equity Practice. Wow. And if I can say that Dejanay has been a strong leader, her whole team has just been outstanding. We partner with them and have had a long-term partnership for quite some time. Due to Dejanay's efforts, she actually had advocated for the new director of DCFS, Heidi Miller, to be here today. She had confirmed, but then she got called into a Senate hearing. So you want to say? Sure.
And I'm sorry, she really wants to be here today because she's really founded in equity and how we treat our families. And so due to Senate hearings and those things that bring our director into different calls, unfortunately she wasn't able to be here, but she absolutely supports this work. And so I think I want you all to know that she supports this work. I feel supported in the work that I'm doing, and that's why it's a safe space for us today. So again, feel free to share, give us all the information, let us see what we can do on the inside, but externally, we're bigger when we have you as a part of our team.
Thank you. So hopefully we'll get to the meet. I have no doubt we'll get a chance to engage with Director Miller at some time in the future. I have heard that she does like to show up and visit folks and, you know, really just talk to people one-on-one, line staff, community members, so we're looking forward to that. Also want to acknowledge some people who will be leading our efforts moving forward after today. So we have, we established actually some years ago some community action teams as part of a larger initiative throughout Illinois called the Illinois Permanency Enhancement Project. Jackie Bright, several other members from DCFS started with there's a group called the African American Advisory Council, and they advocated for some of the initiatives that we have going now, but really focusing on children of color in the child welfare system, more broadly families of color, how they're being treated, what resources they've been provided, etc. So as a result of their work, we established the Illinois Permanency Enhancement Project so that we could have community dialogue. So it's not a top-down process, it's each community identifying what their needs are, what the issues are. And we found that in every community, even an hour away, there are different issues. Some places, the issues surrounded lack of resources, lack of culturally competent, culturally responsive services being provided. Some communities, there were issues with the courts. Some communities, there were issues with staffing. That's probably everywhere now, but just in terms of staff turnover, et cetera. So we found that in each community, there were different needs, and so therefore a need for different solutions. So today we're focusing on Bloomington and Peoria, and our Peoria action team leaders, these will be the people that will be convening follow-up dialogues, follow-up action plans. So we have Jerry Murray and Joan Pegas. Are you here? Can you stand? I know Joan is. Thank you, Jerry. And you want to introduce yourselves and what your role is?
Well, I'm Joan Pegues, and I do work for DCFS. And I'm in the adoptions unit. I've been involved with the developing of Action Team in Peoria County for many years. I'm glad that we're all here today and hoping that out of this we can get a good group to come together and start really working on a lot of the issues that are found here in the central region. Myself and Jerry, of course, are focusing on Peoria County, and there's a lot of work to be done, and I know that we can make some changes. We really need to start to better serve our Black and brown families in Peoria County because we're not doing the best job of it. I see it a lot through adoptions, where families are coming back and saying, well, I can't parent this child anymore. Well, that's not how it works. So we need to make sure that we're doing the work in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end so that we're equipping the families so that they can meet these kids' racial, ethnic, cultural needs, because a lot of times it's not happening. So it's a big issue. So hopefully we will make a lot more progress than what we've had so far.
And Joan, thank you for your leadership. And Jerry, anything you want to say?
Well, Joan summed it up, but Jerry Murray, I'm the executive director of Lutheran Social Services. This actually is my headquarters. Lutheran is one of the largest private agencies in Illinois, and so we stretch all the way from southern Illinois to Cook County. So I think we were going to hear today about some of the things that really need some aggressive work on them. We've got data that proves that there's disproportionality and disparity when it comes to our Black and brown families, and it's not okay anymore. It's not okay anymore. There's opportunities for us to come together collectively because it's not only the state's legal responsibility, but it's the community's responsibility to help contribute and cultivate to the well-being and health of Black and brown families. So I'm happy that we have a room full today, and we're looking for you all to really get involved because it's not just private agencies, it's not just DCFS. We need clergy, we need grassroots leadership. We need community folks. We need grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles. We need everybody to help with this because we're not the experts. We just happen to be involved in an organization. So I'm really hoping that people will be moved by the content today. The data is very revealing. That shows that we do have a problem, but we also have an opportunity. I'm hoping people feel moved and ready to engage. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And then we have our representative from the Bloomington Normal area, Linda Foster from the Bloomington Normal NAACP. Do you want to share a bit about your role?
My role is to ensure that we're treated fairly, and that's what we do. We fight racism, discrimination. Well, that's what we all do. I mean, if we're really doing our job, we're doing it so that we are ensuring that our culture is staying intact. But what does that mean? Because a lot of us don't know what our culture is. But for us, in the role that we're in, we see a lot of things that's happening. We are just so glad to be here. NAACP is in the house. We're on this battlefield together. And it's going to take all of us to make this thing be successful. So thank you all for your commitment to the efforts. And we are survivors and we are winners. So thank you.
Thank you. So for those of you from the Bloomington Normal area, Linda, and if I can ask her colleague, Ms. Belinda Kennedy from the Family and Community Resource Center, they will be heading up the action team for the Bloomington Normal area and have been, but please, no, not quite yet. You want to share a little bit about your agency, which, by the way, came out of this type of advocacy. But please say a few words.
Representing Family Community Resource Center. We are one of the family advocacy centers here, and we're actually the first. We started in 2004, so this coming July will be 20 years that we've been in existence. So we're here it's been 20 years. It seems like a lot of people still don't understand why we're here. We are here to support and educate families while they're going through the process of being involved in the child welfare system. We let them know what their rights are, encourage them to do what is required of them, and hopefully be unified with their families. So all of this work is very important, and I think everyone that has spoken prior to me gave a pretty good summary. So we are so thankful that you came to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda and Linda. So next steps for Bloomington Normal they will be leading the charge for that. We just want to also acknowledge, and it should be in your booklet, all of the people that came together. You know, it started with a small handful of folks, and Jackie and Tiffany and our dear friend Michael. Michael hopefully will be joining us in a little bit, but they said, hey, you know, we have this opportunity for this grant. Approached ISU and said, hey, can you help us due to some of the work we've been doing? And then as you see how this group has grown, and we're just thrilled to be here. We'll be having, again, a series of these dialogues. And we mentioned earlier that one of the anchor initiatives for what we're doing is called the Illinois Permanency Enhancement Project. And it really is about having community-based solutions, having the community state, these are what the issues are, these are what our needs are, and these are the action steps we need to take. And we have some examples of some of those actions that are in your folder that we've initiated. This project started actually in Central and then spread throughout the state. So now every region has action teams. But the goal of reducing disparities among children of color receiving child welfare and child protection services. Also using data to show where the needs are, where the issues are, and where we're seeing improvements and not. And then promoting those stakeholder partnerships, because again, the agencies cannot do this work. These are our children, our families, our communities, so everybody needs to be on board. So my colleague, Michael Burns, who is one of the leading forces, he had a little accident this morning, so everyone lift him up in prayer. He's in the building, but we just wanted him to rest up for a little bit and make sure he's okay. But Michael has really been in the forefront of all of this work. He had planned on talking to you a little bit, or pointing out, does everyone have this handout? Won't spend a lot of time, but when we break into small groups, these might just be some things that will jar some ideas for you. But out of this work, we have had curriculum. Our dear friends in Champaign-Urbana developed a curriculum called Putting My Family Back Together Again, specifically for parents whose children have come into care. We've had family treatment courts developed. Some of these things are no longer going on, and that's one of the things we want to talk about, because sustainability is an issue. When people leave, people retire, budgets get cut, but with all of that, we are still standing. This initiative started in 2008, and we are still standing. So let's give ourselves a round of applause for that. I remember 1 year, maybe about 2-3 years after this initiative started, that the budgets were cut. We didn't even have money to provide lunch for our forums, and we just said, that's fine, we'll do potluck. And everybody brought something, and it was wonderful. That year, the director was able to come, so he had nice home cooked meals. So that is our legacy. That is our legacy. We do what needs to be done, right? So please pay attention to some of those initiatives. And now, without further ado, we will have our keynote speaker, Mr. Lyman Leckers, who represents Casey Family Programs. His bio, please check out his bio. He's been doing great work here, coming to us from Southern California. So,
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be with you this morning. It's certainly my privilege to be in this conversation. Let me start by saying that this is absolutely the right conversation, that we need to be thinking about justice, equity, eliminating racial disparities, racial disproportionality. And what I'm going to suggest to you over the next few minutes is that we need to think bigger. We need to think bigger than we're thinking in terms of projects and singular systems. We need to think, rather than thinking transactionally, we need to think transformationally. And we need to take this conversation to a bigger space and actually dream about something completely different. So those are going to be some of my comments. I work for Casey Family Programs. We're a national foundation. We work across the country our tagline is to provide, improve, and ultimately prevent the need for foster care. We do that in a number of ways. We have direct practice offices in the Western United States that actually work directly with children and families and communities. We have strategic consulting or systems improvement that work with state and federal systems to improve policy practice. We have a number of other activities that we work with. We do research, we do data analysis. That's not my jam, but we do know that data do matter, right? So we gotta make sure we're focused on that. And also I'm pleased to also, my colleague from our policy office, Simone Weil, is here. She's our Director of Public Policy for the state of Illinois, so I invite you to talk with her about her efforts as well. I'm privileged to serve as the Foundation's strategic consultant assigned to the great state of Illinois, so I spend about half my time focused on working with DCFS and beyond, where our primary partner is the state child welfare system, but it's not our exclusive partner. So we get to work with other parts of the state, other parts of the community. We're doing some work on the west side of Chicago with Sankofa Safe Child Initiative. So we're working with provider communities, provider agencies, and thinking about this notion of transformation and what does it mean. So enough introduction. My bio is in your folder, and I was around in 1964. So I was only 5, but I was around. But I've been in this space for a long time in terms of in working in juvenile justice and child welfare, working in the public systems. I had the opportunity to work at the county level in Seattle, worked in philanthropy, worked with the foundation for now 22 years, and spent part of that time in the federal system as a loaned senior fellow to the Department of Justice. So my orientation is pretty eclectic, but it is one that's evolved into really systems thinking and making sure that we're clear about how the systems are structured, the history of the systems that we're operating in, the things that we're doing. And what I will say about this too is that frequently we get into these conversations about what we want to reform, what we want to fix, thinking that the systems are broken. And I want to invite you to consider that maybe the systems are doing exactly what they're designed to do. And so if we're really serious about eliminating racism, racial inequities, racial disparities, and other oppressions, this notion of justice is an intersectional notion. It is the foundation of racism, but we need to be thinking too about gender bias, impact on our LGBTQ plus communities, and now even the growing issues with immigration status, how our systems are really designed to other certain populations, and the outcomes shouldn't be surprising to us. So when we think about transformation, I think that's something that we need to keep centered. We can continue to tinker with what we have, and that's good. We need to do both. We need to improve what we have, but we also need to think about something completely different. So I hope some of my comments today will invite that thinking, invite that the transformational thinking, the vision thinking. I don't have answers to that, but you do. The community does. So this orientation in community is absolutely right, and we need to challenge our systems to be proximate with the children and families that we serve and with the community assets and resources that actually can solve the problems. So, let me see where, I don't know where I am right now. Yeah, okay, cool. We're gonna go on this adventure together, okay?
There are no clickers today.
So, have done a lot of work over the last several years on this notion of well-being. And when I think about well-being, I have to go beyond what we traditionally know as well-being. And in child welfare space, well-being is kind of the third leg, right? It's safety first, permanency next. You know, if we got some time or some money, we'll throw some stuff at well-being, right? And it's centered on education, employment, and mental health. I think that well-being is absolutely the umbrella frame for everything that we should be doing. But that requires us to really think beyond what we have, beyond the way the systems are currently structured. And I'll talk a little bit more about well-being and this notion of actually thinking about well-being not as a state that we actually get to and stay at, but it's a continual process of well-becoming. The healing aspect, I love the notion of healing Illinois. That's amazing, you know, how we talk about healing, and that's part of what the transformational effort has to center. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we arrived at this notion of well-becoming. Our president and CEO, Dr. William Bell, who's been with the foundation almost as long as I have, a little over 20 years, frequently, almost always starts our gatherings, our meetings at the foundation with this question. He asks us all, how are the children? How are they? And to really center that question in our thinking, in our work together. He's been asking it for a number of years. We have yet to be able to come back and say, the children are well. And so I think that's the goal that we need to embrace, at least on a conceptual level. If we're serious about doing better by children and families, we need to be clear about what's going to ultimately be able to get us to a point where we can answer that question, that the children are well and that they're doing well in community and family. We all have children in our lives. If you don't have your own children, you have brothers and sisters, you have nephews, nieces, you have a neighbor, you know somebody that's got a kid, right? So I invite you to think about the children that are in your lives. And what do you hope for them? What is your hope for the children that you are, not the children you work with, the children that are in your lives. You can think about your own children. For me, it's my grandchildren now, and I'm going to share a little story about my grandson a little later. What do we hope for our children? Do we pick parts of them? Do we hope that they have a good education? Or do we hope that they do well economically? Or do we hope that they are healthy? Or do we hope that they are safe? Or do we hope that they have a nice home and are essentially well and growing well? We don't pick. We pick it all, right? We pick it all. We pick everything that we want to see, that we desire for the children that are in our lives. Do we do that for the children that we work with? In my experience, not so much, because we dissect the children and families based on the circumstance that presents them to us, and based on where we sit in the spectrum of systems that impact children and families and communities. So the invitation is to really think beyond that. How do we engage in a broad effort to transform what we have to something that is really focused on well-being? Sorry, I answered the question before I put it up there. Choose it all, right? And then for other people's children, what do we believe, what do we hope for them? And so I think as we think about this transformational discussion, this broadening our thinking around what's best for children and families, getting out of the siloed structures that we operate in, we really have to interrogate what we believe about other people's children and what we want, what we desire, and what we pick for other people's children. Because that's what we're all about, right? We're here to serve other people's children. And so just be thoughtful about that. I invite you to lean into that question as we have the conversation throughout the day. So there's some prevailing narratives. Our system, the system, if we're talking about child welfare has a history, has a 150-year, maybe 200-year history, but it's founded on this notion of rescue. We have to save these poor children from these bad families. And oh, by the way, we're probably going to punish the families a little bit on the back end too, right? We continue to operate within a system, a siloed system, whose primary tool for keeping children safe is to remove them from their families. And in my estimation, and again, I already said that data is not my jam, but in my estimation, the bulk of children that come into care are more traumatized by the experience of being taken away from their parents than they are by the presenting issue that brought them to our attention. But we don't think like that. We respond, we react, and this is not an indictment. So please, I know there are people in here that are focused on investigations and doing child protection work, and that's incredibly important. I'm not dismissing the paramount nature of safety. I'm inviting us to think bigger, to think broader than that. So there's this rescue, the foundation of a rescue mentality in child welfare. So we need to, again, interrogate the history of child welfare. We don't have time to do that today, but I invite you to think about how populations have come to enter child welfare. African American populations in this country really weren't prevalent in child welfare until the 1950s and 60s, the late 50s and 60s. What brought those populations in? Why were they not included early on? And so understanding the context of that, of the history there. There's a law and order perspective, and this shifts to a different system, criminal justice, juvenile justice. But law and order in this country is conflated with justice. We say justice when we really mean law and order, control, retribution, do the crime, do the time. That's the orientation that we have to contemplate and include in our thinking. The science is growing, but like the systems is very much siloed. The data that we collect, the metrics that we collect are distinctly different by which system is collecting them. So we talk about safety and permanency in the child welfare space. Juvenile justice is talking about recidivism rates and criminogenic risk factors. The education system is talking about its indicators. They don't talk to each other. They're not aligned, right? And so science and research, data analysis is part of this equation too. How do we get them to consider a collective analysis of children and families, not based on which system they're being served by, but based on what they need and what their focus is. We are good at this. We're really good at tinkering with our systems. We build programs and projects, and again, this is not binary. We have to tinker, we have to continue to improve what we have, but we also have to be thinking about what we want. What are we trying to transform to? What are we trying to create? And that's part of the beauty of the invitation for today, is to have that conversation. What do we want? What do we want for children and families? Can we see beyond the circumstances that are right in front of us? Can we actually get to a place where we're working across systems, working with partners, with ultimately maybe even making ourselves obsolete? How about that? What if there was no longer a need for child protection? What if there was no longer a need for the kinds of systems that we currently operate? I know that's like some of you all thinking about your caseload or your meetings tomorrow, and but that's the tension that we have to hold. We have to continue to do the good work that we do while thinking about something different for our future. We identify children and families by what presents them to us. We put labels on them. And we have a hard time breaking loose of those identities, right? If you think about the data trends, and I told you data's not my jam, right? But the data trends in Illinois suggest that children come into care, and by and large don't really come out of care. They stay in care for long periods of time. Why is that? If a child comes into care for a safety issue at 7, why are they still in care at 15? Is that safety issue the same? Probably not, but we still use that frame to keep them in care. So being thoughtful about the identities that we create for children and families based on how they present to us, and that invites us to bring a humanistic frame into the discussion. Being able, and somebody said it earlier, somebody used the term empathy. Can we connect with people that have a different experience from us and believe them, even though that's not our experience or our orientation? So our current systems, they're reactive. We intervene after something's already happened. What I know about the community work that's been done in Illinois, some of it's stayed, some of it hasn't, but it's been designed to move upstream, right? Not to be reactive, but to be proactive in communities and providing services and supports for families in community before they come into the respective systems. But our systems are designed to react. We don't get involved until something has already happened. We say child protection. And again, this is not an indictment on anybody in the room, but we say child protection, but we don't do anything until that child's already been hurt or put at risk. So rethinking that a little bit too, rethinking about how our child welfare, broader child welfare is framed, and then what the specific function of child protection is an important consideration as well. We focus on investigations and findings. And this is true not just child welfare, this is true beyond. This is in criminal justice, juvenile justice system. You know, we go out and investigate and we're looking for something, right? We're looking for something. We're looking for something that triggers our response in those systems. So we need to think about what we want our system to really be focused on. We have a deficit orientation. We're looking for the problems. We're looking for the issues that families are struggling with. And often, in my experience, and this is true in our direct practice at Casey Family Program, where I worked for the first 10 years, we would see problems that weren't even associated with the original complaint, the original investigation, but the problems continue to pile on to these families. So we see this issue, or we can't return the child home because you have this issue that has nothing to do with the investigation, right? We continue to pile on these things, these burdens. So the bar for removing a child
For tomorrow?
from their home is right here. The bar for returning a child home is way up here somewhere. So again, thinking about that and what we really want. I've already mentioned that the methods that we use, and it's not just child welfare, it's in the education system, it's in the criminal justice system, it's in other systems. The methods that we use are trauma-inducing, and if we're going to be serious about healing, then we need to be thoughtful about that. What do we need to shift to move away from trauma-inducing practice? The racial disparities, the injustice is prevalent in every single system that touches our children and families, right? So it is prevalent, and for me, that begs the question of, can we solve disproportionality, disparity in child welfare without a direct connection, a direct link to the other systems that are serving children and families? It's something that we've wrestled with for a long time. Casey Family Program has been in this conversation since I started working there 22 years ago, and we still struggle with this kind of singular system focus. We're centering on changing child welfare, but we're not contemplating the impact of other systems on child welfare. If the primary reporters are coming from the education system and there are disparity issues or questions related to bias in the education system, why are we not working alongside of education to create solutions for those problems? I think too, we thought if we're serious about healing and eliminating injustice, racialized or otherwise, we have to be clear that we're probably not going to do it through transactional relationships. We're probably not going to do it by tinkering around the child welfare system. So we have to consider this idea of transformation. What does transformation mean? And to be clear, I believe that we will not eliminate racial injustices, racial disparities without a transformational focus. And we can't speak about transformation if we're not speaking about racism and the other oppressions that impact our children and families. We're disconnected. Our silos are rigid. We spend a lot of time digging moats around the silos that we operate in rather than bridges across them. And so if we're going to be serious about transformation, about getting to this healing idea, I think again that I would, well, my wife tells me to tell grown folks what they should do. But I invite you to consider, that we need to think beyond the system that we work in. We need to align ourselves, figure out what the connections are we need to make with other systems that are touching our children and families. So what if we shifted our focus? What if we shifted our focus to something bigger, something beyond what we currently have, what we're currently working with? What if we shifted our focus to what I mentioned earlier, this notion of well-being as the common frame for all of our collective work and our transformational efforts? This is a definition of well-being that I had the opportunity to work on with a group of folks from the Youth Transition Funders group, and I think that the well-being framework that we developed and published in 2021 is going to be made available to you electronically. It's a little bit too big to print, but I invite you to look at that. Again, it's not going to give you answers, but it will help you reframe the discussion, reframe some of the outcomes that we're driving towards. But well-being is a satisfactory human condition characterized by health, happiness, and fulfillment. Well-being is not a state of being that one achieves and then lives that in for a lifetime. And I told you I was around the 64, so my well-being right now is all about my knees. It's not a circumstance. Well-being is a constant, it's something we have to pay constant attention to. It's not a particular circumstance that we can get to and stay. Defining for oneself, moving forward, and achieving well-being is a continued developmental process, beginning at infancy and continuing throughout the course of life. Indeed, a better term for the process may be well-becoming. So that's what I invite you, that's one of the things that I invite you to consider. Is that something that resonates? Is that something that we can build into our thinking together? So why well-being? Little story. Actually, many of you know Brian Samuels and Claire Anderson, who worked for Townhall. When they were at the Administration for Children and Families in DC, I happened to be on loan to the Department of Justice, and we did some work together. They actually promoted this much broader framework of well-being in child welfare, with a specific focus on child welfare. It went beyond the education, employment, and mental health, and really focused on the need for us to pay attention to well-being of children and families. The Youth Transition Funders Group had just written a well-being framework for child welfare, and we're sitting in this meeting together looking at that. One of my colleagues from another foundation elbowed me. She knew I was at the Department of Justice working on juvenile justice issues, and she said, we need one of these for juvenile justice. And this is my brilliance. It's like, oh, what would be different? What would be different? Do we talk about well-being for children that are involved in juvenile justice, well-being for children that are involved in child welfare, or really do we need to be thinking about well-being, well-becoming for all children and families, and not continue to dissect them by system? So that's what led us to write the well-being framework that I think will be shared with you later, that is much more comprehensive. So well-being unifies us. It can unify across systems. It can unify within systems, within DCFS, within other systems that are touching our children and families. A colleague of mine, I now take credit for this term, after 3 times you get to take full credit, but a colleague of mine suggested that well-being is a coagulating agent. When you think about it beyond what we know, it brings us together. It brings us together in a collective way in how we think about children and families. It travels. Well-being travels from system to system. Hard time getting folks from juvenile justice to come over here and talk about safety from abuse and neglect. That's CPS function. Hard time getting them to come over here and talk about permanency. Well, that's what you all do. We don't deal with that. But when we start to articulate investments in well-being from a multi-systems perspective, and we did that in the framework, we were able to define well-being from a child welfare perspective, from a juvenile justice perspective, from a mental health, behavioral health perspective, really thinking about our collective efforts driving towards well-being. We may have different responsibilities or different areas of focus, but if we're all driving towards the same thing, it again becomes that coagulating agent, and it travels from system to system. Narrow, siloed approaches, we've already demonstrated that they don't work. These systems have been around for a while. We're essentially getting, with some improvements, absolutely improvement is happening, but we're essentially getting the same results that have been around for a while. So encouraging us to think broader, and they just haven't worked for the children and families that we serve. It really helps us shift, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this, from a transactional perspective, having a relationship across systems that is more quid pro quo, or if you do this for me, I'll do this for you, and really gets us into a transformational framework. We're talking collectively about something completely different. It offers a life course perspective. Our attention in the systems are primarily focused on particular points in time. When we get a child safe, when we get a child removed and put into a foster home or a residential placement or a relative placement, they're safe. We're done with that circumstance. Same is true for the criminal justice system. When we get them held accountable for their crime, we're done. We're not thinking about what's beyond that. We have done work in a number of venues with a gentleman named Arnold Chandler and another woman named Tia Martinez, who have introduced us to this notion of life course. What's the impact of the decision that we're making today on this child or on this family, not just next week, but next year, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? Even the notion of the trauma-inducing approaches that we use, removing a child. Do we contemplate the traumatic impact on that child and how that's going to manifest as they move into adolescence and adulthood? Do we think about that? So we think that well-being offers us a life course perspective. It aligns with current science. We brought in a lot of science to describe or to help us frame out what well-being was, the developmental assets, the social determinants of health, all those things that we know about that we can invest in children and families. And it really does set healing and wholeness as the goal, not just resolving that presenting circumstance, but making sure that that child and family is on that road towards well-becoming. And it centers racialized injustice. We have to have the intention towards resolving the issues of racism and other oppressions, not just as, I mean, it has to be both centered, so very much centered like the Office of Racial Equity Practice that Dejanay leads, but also a through line through everything that we do. It's not going to be effective. It will not be as effective as it could be if it's centered in an office and not seen as a collective responsibility for all of us to pay attention to and invest in. So this notion of well-being absolutely does both. You'll see a through line, you can see a through line through all of the well-being domains, but also making sure that it's centered. In fact, the well-being framework from YTFG is the only place that I've seen racial justice defined and described as a specific well-being domain. So I invite you to, when you get a chance to look at it, to react to that. Does that make sense? Does it feel right? We're definitely interested in feedback. So, how am I doing? I'm good? I'm good? Okay. So now I'm gonna introduce you to my grandson. So Saturday was AJ's 9th birthday. And I'm telling you this story because it confirmed in me that we can actually bridge our fields of expertise, bridge our systems, bridge our particular specialties, bridge our collective experience to actually drive together towards a collective outcome. My grandson, and just to be clear, I was the first grandparent there. So, yeah, you know, my wife and the other grandma, anyway, I was the first one there. So this is the first time I met AJ. He was in NICU for 6 weeks. And if anybody's had an experience in NICU, you know what that's like from a parent, grandparent, family member perspective, the stress, the questions, the angst that we all experience. But what I observed in AJ's 6 weeks in NICU was a collective of people, all with different areas of specialty, different disciplines. Now, they were all in the medical field, I get that, but when you think about it, there were doctors, multiple doctors, not just one, multiple doctors. There was a whole team of nurses, all with different specialties. There were nutritionists, people who did blood work, the neurologists doing the nerve and brainwave work. All of these people all working together with one goal: to help AJ become well. And so I observed this, and so again, anybody who's experienced NICU, I hope that's the same experience that you had. I know that often there's tragedy that comes out of NICU, but to me, watching that confirmed that we have to do better in aligning ourselves across systems to serve children and families. So this was AJ after he got out of NICU. And this is AJ now. He's 9 years old. He went to his first Dodgers game on Saturday with his dad, and so I didn't have time to download that picture. That was really cool. Hit the break if you're interested. I'll be happy to share. But he's a very precocious, very healthy 9-year-old young man who's thriving. And there's obviously a lot of credit to parents and grandparents since the time he was in NICU, but if NICU hadn't done what they did, I don't think he would be where he is. So, Casey Family Programs has been in lots of discussions about what a 21st century child, here it says 21st century well-being system. I think it's really a 21st century child, family, and community well-being system, and what that might look like and how we might think about that as a transformational frame for us to consider. So a 21st century system would be proactive and protective. So not waiting to react, but actually investing in resources for children and families before they come into our systems. Be focused on primary prevention, which means actually preventing abuse and neglect from a child welfare perspective, but in other avenues it's preventing criminal behavior or any of those issues, poor educational outcomes, really getting into that preventional space. And when it doesn't work, making sure that the interventions come early. And the interventions not being those trauma-inducing interventions that we use, right? But thinking differently about how we intervene. Strengths-based and holistic, seeing families and communities as resource. Not the other, not us versus them, but really seeing families and communities as having something to contribute to this discussion. There's power, there's strength. We don't have to empower community. We have to recognize the power that exists in community and invite that into our conversations. Offers a life course perspective, I talked about that a moment ago. It really incorporates a commitment to racial equity, and that's what I was saying earlier, that if we're serious about transformation, we also have to be serious about eliminating racial disparities, racial injustice. So what do we do when we come together with this kind of energy in a room? All of us, I'm sure, have experienced these kind of charged up conversations. We're gonna do something different, we're gonna create something different, we're gonna be really good at this. What happens? Can y'all see that? I want you to find a bold and innovative way to do exactly the same thing that's been done for 25 years. Have you been in one of those projects before?
Yep.
Let's change that. Let's think differently about that. Let's do something that doesn't get into this project orientation. I think, you know, some of the examples that Dr. Doris shared earlier around things that have happened in this community already that are either dormant or went away because of some whatever, but they are focused on community and being proximate in community and bringing resources in the community. Why didn't they stick, or why didn't they have the outcome that we desired? And that's where I think we need to consider this notion of transformation versus tinkering. So transformation is an organizational in an organizational context is a process of profound and radical change that orients an organization or system in a new direction and takes them into an entirely different level of effectiveness. Unlike turnaround or reform, which implies incremental process, transformation implies a basic change of character and little or no resemblance to the past configuration or structure. So that's something completely different. We say transformation a lot. Families First and Prevention Services Act was described as this is the transformational thing, the most transformational thing on child welfare in decades. Families First fixed the funding problem. It fixed the funding problem. It's not fundamentally changing the way we practice. It's not fundamentally changing the way we work. So being thoughtful about that, how can we get into really believing that we can create something completely different? So there's some myths out there, and this is some new work for me. I've been trying to do kind of reform, transformation work for a long time. Done a lot of work on cross systems, particularly between juvenile justice and child welfare. But we continue to run into things that impact us, the myths that play out and what we think can happen. There's some new work by Dr. Jean Ginwright. Anybody know Dr. Ginwright? Anybody heard of him? Sam, you know him? He's done some phenomenal work in radical healing and racialized trauma. He's done some phenomenal work in understanding the complexity or the connection with community. But his latest book is called The Four Pivots, and he invites us to think about how we really want to get into this transformation space, how we really want to fundamentally change the way systems operate. We want our communities to operate, and we want for our children and families to be well. So there's some myths that he suggests. One, that we can actually have a deep impact by promoting surface level solutions. Those are the projects, the programs, the things that touch the surface, but don't actually get to the root of the issue that we're trying to solve. So we have to resist that temptation to be in that space where we think a project is going to change the world. We think a new program or a new 501c3. There needs to be a collective orientation to getting to root causes. And we can do that. We know how to do that. The question is, do we have the attention, the wherewithal, the stamina, the political will, all of those things that we need to figure out how to, as ingredients to this, to get us to that place where we can go deep. More power, more change. The more power we have, the more change we can create. Now, there's some semblance of truth to that. So there's power in community. We want to recognize the power in community and exercise that power. But we also need to be careful about that, because what he suggests, and you all know this from the work that you do, is that if we're not paying attention to our individual power, which comes through our own wellness and our own healing, there's a caution there. And so we need to be thoughtful about that. How do we make sure that there's a collective intention towards the workforce, towards our own well-being? We're actually doing some work with some leaders across the country now that are all leading child welfare systems. They're leaders of color who are leading child welfare systems in the current environment and challenging racial injustice. And so that requires a whole nother level of investment. And so doing some work around very simple things, movement, breathing, water, all things that I wish I'd done 20 years ago, but understanding that we have to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention to workforce. Whether you're leading an agency, Jerry, or you're a community agency, or whether you're leading a big agency like DCFS, we have to pay attention to the workforce and the people that are in community doing what we're asking them to do. And we can strategize for social change. This is we build our work on tactics and strategies. We need to be thoughtful around what that means, and I think strategize would imply that we're doing something within the context of what we know, within the context of child protection or child welfare, rather than thinking transformation and going beyond that. So being careful not to fall into the trap of, oh, I got this brilliant idea, I'm going to build a strategy around it, and it's going to change the world, and I'm going to be able to do it in this little pocket over here or with this little idea over here. And really, how does that contribute to the collective effort towards transformation? And finally, that we are somehow enemies with other people. I mean, I had to chuckle as everybody who introduced themselves from DCFS said it's still a safe place. DCFS is not the enemy. The community's not the enemy. The families and children that we serve are not the enemy. And the other systems that we work with are not the enemy. It's not us versus them. When we get locked into that tension, we want to blame other folks, right? Why isn't the education system doing better and keeping the kids out of the system? Why are we doing better in making sure our kids aren't going from residential placement into juvenile justice? Rather than figuring out how we come together collectively, figure out what we're investing in, and build something completely different. So resist that temptation to see others as the enemy. Our current society, our current environment in this society is so polarized that it takes an incredible amount of intention and energy to resist this notion of us versus them. But I think that is one of the clear antidotes to the systems that we're in, the struggles that we're in, and can really bring us together. Five more minutes? Okay. I'm going to wrap up on these last 4 points, and then invite your questions. Do we still have questions? Okay. Invite your questions, and I'll be around, so happy to engage in the discussion. Dr. Jenwright invites us to consider 4 pivots, 4 small shifts. Where is our gaze? Where are we looking? When we're struggling with problems, issues that raise tension, issues that we're trying to resolve, in my experience, almost always I'm looking out the window. I'm looking with a lens that looks at it as a problem or somebody else's fault or somebody else's issue. Dr. Jenwright invites us to shift our gaze from the mirror, from that lens that or from the window, or from that lens that we're looking through, to the mirror. What's our why? Why are we here? What is our commitment to this? Are we willing to do what it takes to move forward? What have I contributed to that might be part of the problem? And what do I need to shift in that space? So shifting our lens, shifting our gaze from lens or window to the mirror, The second one is to really be about transformational and engage in relationships that are transformational. Many of us in this room have the power to invest in transformation for young people. But if we see it only as a transaction, solving this circumstance, checking this box, making sure this service gets provided, making sure this court order is followed, I mean, that's a transactional relationship. So from a practice perspective to a systems perspective, we need to shift our thinking from transactional to transformational. Problems, shifting our focus on problems to solve to possibilities that we could create. And that's what I think what largely this conversation today is about. What are the possibilities that this movement, this energy that comes out of this space and the other two meetings that are going to happen, and other meetings too. I mean, this is not the only place this conversation is happening. It's happening with the providers, it's happening within DCFS, it's happening in other communities. How do we align around this notion and really see the possibilities rather than, and the system will always, the system is resilient, in case you didn't notice, the system is resilient and it will always shift us back to, we gotta solve this problem. We gotta focus on this kid right here, we gotta focus on this family. And we have to wrestle with that because we do have to focus on that, but not just that. We need to think about the possibilities we could create beyond what's presented in front of us. And lastly, I love this because Dr. Jenwright suggests that we're addicted to frenzy. Mm-hmm. We're doing something if we're busy, right? I'm too busy to answer that email. I'm too busy to do this, that, and the other thing. And if I'm busy, I'm doing something. Really shifting our attention from the hustle, the day-to-day frenzy that we're all engaged in, and nobody's immune from it, right? But really, how do we flow? How do we set aside time to center our own healing, our own wellness? How do we set aside time to contemplate this notion of transformation, something bigger than us, something bigger than what we currently have? So it's a great book. I'm not his publicist or his agent, but, and it's not the only game out there, right? There are lots of resources that help us think about transformation, think about how we can create something new and how we can do that collectively. But I think that the discussion that Dr. Jim, and he's also engaged in healing center engagement. So he's written about radical healing. He's got an organization that focuses on healing center engagement at the foundation. We're doing some work with him and his organization on how that influences practice and the strategic consulting work that we do. So I didn't mean to end on a plug for Dr. Jenwright, but I encourage you to take a look at the 4 pivots. And with that, I think I am done. And I thank you for inviting me into your space and for allowing me to be part of this. I'm happy to answer questions. I do have a caveat about questions, though, and I shared it with Dr. Ross earlier that sometimes you open it up to questions and somebody wrote their dissertation on your topic, right? So if you wrote your dissertation on this, please talk with the planning team. We'll get you your own workshop. But the dialogue, the questions. What are you curious about? We only have about 10 or 15 minutes or however much time.
And they'll have more time in
More
the
time
small
later.
group as well.
You'll have time to small group too, but if you have questions for me, yeah, okay, so whatever questions you have for me, if none, that's fine. Please.
I have a question. When listening to you talk so much about transformation and how I wrote down something that said it implies a basic change of character with little to no resemblance of the past structure, which I really like.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything you're saying that there's no way to fix these little things. What do you say that we do day to day in our current jobs? How are we, what is your advice to kind of move forward as much as we can with transportation within the limitations of our job and the things we have to do, especially coming from a casework background? There's just one crisis after another. There's no time to stop and think. So I'm so caught up in just kind of trying to get through the next thing. So
Well, so first I would say take care of yourself, because you're doing good work and you're doing necessary work, and you have to make sure that you're well and healed in order to continue to do that work. Secondly, I would say think transformationally. And even within the context of the power or influence that you do have, whether it's with a specific child or family that you're working with, can you think beyond that circumstance that's presenting them to you? And can you think about what you might invest in that child and family? And then within the organization that you work with, how do you engage in those conversations? I get it. These are big systems. They're not going to just change overnight. They're not going to change because Lyman said we need to transform, right? There needs to be some intention towards that discussion. What do we want? What do we envision for our children and families? So there's no formula for that. There's no linear progression to that. Transformation requires us to think collectively. So how can you think beyond the organization that you sit in? Who can you work with to, do some little pockets of change? So I wish I had like this magic formula for you, but it's a great question. I encourage you to continue to engage in that question. How can I?
Okay.
How can I?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Time for one more question, and then Lyman will be here for the remainder of the day, and we can also engage when we have some small group discussions.
Great.
Are there systems in other states that you're aware of that are doing transformational types of modeling? Is there something that
you can borrow from?
No.
That's a good question.
My thought process is that the things that we need to work towards changing are so much bigger than my organization, bigger than the community organizations that I have in my community, so on and so forth. So
So let me say, is there another place that is actually transformed?
Transforming.
I know, I'm trying to frame my answer to your question. So there's no place that I know of that is fundamentally transformed. There are places that are in this conversation in different ways. The one that comes to mind most recently that I know about is San Diego County, where they've actually integrated their departments across systems, so there's not it's all under the same department where you have child welfare, behavioral health, mental health, juvenile justice, economic services, so there's an integration at least structurally. I can't tell you that that's happened at the practice level, but at least structurally there's an intention towards that alignment and integration. There are a ton of places that have embraced the crossover youth practice model out of Georgetown, which is something that invites us to work together. It's primarily focused on child welfare and juvenile justice, but it is a place where you can take those principles beyond that. We can certainly, as this work continues, as a foundation, we have relationships with all 50 states, so we can ask that question beyond this discussion and bring back resources and ideas about what's happening across the country. You can, yes. You should have probably done this presentation, Dave.
And I think it's a very interesting question because even leading the Office of Race Equity practice at DCFS, I can't do that without, when I said that, like asked to work with the community, like that's a real thing. Like I can't do that in my office. There's no template, with the word you're gonna use, of how we transform, right? We have the Permanency Enhancement project. Some of the things we're here to talk about today, that's doing work in the community. It's about finding a place and trying to figure out how can I be transformative in that place, right? Because there's so many places where we can do it, and trying to figure out where you get in will overwhelm you and say, you know what, it's too big for me. But where can I get to a space? We have community action teams. We just talked about Joan and Jerry's in Peoria. There's Linda, Belinda, and Bloomington Normal. Like, how do you get engaged in that work? How do you bring what you see? The other young lady talked about something in terms of her work as a caseworker. How do you bring some of those challenges that you see in that space and bring that to the bigger community to say, hey, this is what we see happening. How can we do this on a bigger scale? It can't happen really right here in this place, but with all these people involved, all these people's voices, maybe we can have some change. And that's how we started looking for transformation. It's not a cookie cutter. It doesn't exist. I don't have a method at all. I use the community and my stakeholders, folks to help who want to see a difference and say, hey, how can we do this one thing? And that starts the next thing, right? So I would encourage you to get involved in some of the activities that's happening in your community. And will bring, you can bring value to that space. And that's where transformation starts. Just you coming to that space, right? Getting folks to that space. That's all I want to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just that whole notion of from problems to possibilities. So let's use this space. Many times we're dealing with that problem that's right in front of our eyes, right? So let's think broader. We have a wonderful facilitator later, Mr. Sam Smith, if you want to raise your hand there. He will be walking us through into some small group discussions about how we move from problems to responsibilities. We are going to take a small break, but before we do have an elected official in the room. If we want to, if you could stand and say hello to the people, Mr. Andre
Thank you so much, Dr. Houston. My name is Andre Allen. I'm a member of the Peoria City Council. I also work for Peoria County Government as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. So appreciate the opportunity to be in this space with you all and hear about the great things that you all are doing and just seeing how we can collaborate and work with all these different systems. So thank you again.
Thank you, Andre. And it's so important. A lot of what I've seen over the years is that because of that groundswell of everyday community, people, concerned citizens, etc., that can lead to some of the change, whether it's in legislation, whether it's in funding, whether it's in new programs, whether it's in court. The way the courts are operating, we have seen some change over that. So I want to acknowledge you. We are taking a small break.
Linda Foster came from Bloomington, Illinois, Family Community Resource Center Support Specialist. Hey, we're just so ecstatic about being here. And being in another role as the NAACP president, this encourages me to be able to go back and to know that there's others, as I know that you have been doing. We need to just collaborate, connect, and talk about what we can do to improve lives of those that are finding themselves caught up. Sometimes not of their doing, but caught up. But if it is of their doing, we want to get them uncaught so they can understand what living is all about. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say, as we were planning, there's always that worry, will people come? Will we have people who are really interested and will take their time, especially when we have people traveling from other places. But you all have showed up, and we're expecting you to show out. And but just want to thank you for being here. Our children are our most precious investment, our most precious gifts. Wouldn't you agree? So there's no other conversation that we can have into how we can not only help them survive but thrive. So let's just think about that. What are our best hopes? What are our best dreams? What are our best visions for our children and their families and communities? Because they don't live in a bubble, right? So they're all connected. So after break, I'm going to share some statistics on where we are now in terms of the state of child welfare in both Bloomington and Peoria. So we do have county level statistics. But then we'll also from there have some discussion, because for all of those statistics you'll see there are children behind those numbers. There are parents behind those numbers. So we'll show the numbers, but then from there, how are we interpreting these? Sam will walk us through that. And then what is our vision for the future? We already have lunch that's coming up. And so what do we think? A 5-minute break, will that do? Just give you a full disclosure. So we generally prepare an annual report where we look at new data and, if we need on any. So this report is actually from this previous this year's statistics. We're still working to finalize the new data, and so when you come back for your local action team meetings, we should have that data ready. Okay, so just to give you a state of who's in foster care now. Within the state of Illinois, there are approximately 19,000 children in care. And then what you see here, these numbers are representing when they're in care. Some children are in what's called traditional foster care. Some are in with relatives. Some are in a residential facility or group home. Or there might be other. Within other, that could also be the juvenile justice system, or maybe some students or children may be on the run or other circumstances. But just to give you at least a broad view, you see in Peoria there are a total, and this is of spring, actually of March 2024, 746 children in care in Peoria, and 321 in spring. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because we really want to have that time for dialogue, but it's important that you just get some grounding here. I always like to show this slide because it shows over time, and it's just something to think about. When children enter foster care, they're consistently, over the years, really decades, there's about a 50-50 chance that they will return to foster care. So, that's something to think about. All the more reason for us to put as much support as we can in our communities, in families. So that's just something to think about, that we may think, oh, it's a small issue, or, they're coming out, we need to remove the children for a short period of time. But consistently, the numbers show it's about a 50% chance of a child returning. We know that there are many underlying conditions that children and their parents and their families are experiencing. And there's a lot of conversation about trauma. There's a lot of conversation about ACEs. So these are those traumatic life circumstances that we know our children who are in care are experiencing, as well as their parents. But then also those issues become exacerbated because there's additional trauma for children who come as they come into care. So some of those, and there are many more, abuse and neglect. If there's a parent who's an alcoholic, domestic violence survivor of a mother, an incarcerated family member, a mentally ill family member, or certainly a loss of a parent, either through divorce, death, abandonment, foster care, or adoption. Gun violence, a witness or a victim of gun violence. All of these are examples of some of those traumatic circumstances that our children are facing beforehand, and these really speak to those underlying conditions that our families are experiencing. So if we really want to prevent children from coming into care, these are the issues that we need to deal with. So here we want to talk specifically about some of the outcomes for African American children in the Peoria and Bloomington area. And I will say, as I was looking at this data, some things will surprise you and some things won't. Keeping in mind that we've been doing this advocacy work now for a number of years. The Permanency Enhancement Initiative started in 2008. And although we cannot claim credit for a particular initiative, but that groundswell, I want you to know that groundswell of advocacy, of people working with their elected officials, administrators, it can and does make a difference. So I'll show you some things along the way, and then Sam will lead us into some discussions. there are some key areas that we call decision-making points that really we like to track because there's a continuum of engagement within DCFS and private agencies that we really need to look at if we're looking at progress. So the first area that we always like to start with is the reports of child abuse and neglect. Who's making the reports, but then out of those who are making the reports, what proportion of those reports result in a finding of abuse and neglect? So I'm going to walk you through some of those because these really speak to some of the stakeholders that we need to have present as we're looking at solving problems. Is this seeable? Is it too small? That we blew it up as much as we can. So just a quick orientation. So these are the primary reporters that call into the hotline for abuse and neglect. And so I'll just read off these, but law enforcement, medical providers, personnel, DCFS employees, other licensed service providers, schools, social services, family members, and other general non-mandated reporters. So when we look at this data, what we see, the green lines are showing the number of calls. The orange lines are showing the proportion of those calls that result in a finding of abuse and neglect. Anything stand out to you? Law enforcement. Law enforcement. Schools.
I'm actually surprised that DCFS employees is as low as it is compared to other reporters.
Yeah. So when we think about that entryway, when we think about that gateway or entryway, that initial introduction into the child welfare system, we have to have those dialogues with our law enforcement, with our schools. Also, when we think of particularly the schools, out of the calls that were made, 10% of those calls resulted in a finding. So the question becomes, are there interventions, are there supports that our schools and our law enforcement, as well as others, we have family members that also make calls, but focusing in on law enforcement and schools, each community is slightly different, but pretty much the same, pretty similar. But how many people, any school representatives here today? Okay, oh, Sam. So for us to have these dialogues, law enforcement representatives couldn't make it. So these are the folks that need to be at the table. These are the entry points into the child welfare system. So that was Bloomington. This is Peoria. Now Peoria looks a little different. Again, each community is different. We see law enforcement. There's a higher proportion of those calls that result in finding of abuse and neglect. Medical reporters are next. And then there's actually, for schools, the numbers are still a little small. 15% school reports result in a finding. So these are mandated reporters, and we would never want someone who is suspecting abuse not to call that in. But some of the questions for our community leaders are, what might be some possibilities that could prevent us getting to the point of a hotline call? Common sense. If I could just share very quickly, I know we want a tight time schedule, but just to, it really raised the point for me. I teach child welfare courses, and there was a student, one of my students who also works for a daycare center. And so she said, I have a question. I'm not really sure if I should call this in to the hotline or not. She said, we have a mother that drives up to the front of the building every day, and I guess they had a like a storefront place, and she would park her car, her infant is in the child seat, but she would leave the infant, come in and get the three-year-old child, and she said, you know, she's leaving the infant in the car, and is that something we should call in a report on? And so I said to her, well, you know, one option to consider is if you see this mother is needing support, instead of making a call, can you help her? Maybe someone on your staff can watch the child. Maybe you can bring the 3-year-old out to her. So how many of you, when we look at those stories behind the numbers, are there things that each of us in our organizations can and should be doing? So now I'm going to go into, so we have the hotline report. So there's an initial screening, and from the hotline report, the hotline, and isn't there someone here from SCR, the State Central Registry? I thought. Yeah. Oh yes. Sharon. Okay, great. So that hotline report, we have it's centralized in Springfield. The calls come in. And some of them, after those questions, get screened in for further investigation, some do not. We have a formula that based on the child population, that we use to calculate out a disparity index. So for, again, I'll do McLean and Peoria. So for McLean County, I'll just explain these numbers. 3.98, which is almost 4, number 4. So African American children within McLean are 4 times more likely to have a report that then is moved on for further investigation. It's accepted for potential abuse and neglect. Hispanic children, 1.6%. So about 4 times more likely for African Americans once that call comes in. For Peoria, a little bit less, but still about the chances of an African American child or a report coming in that would result in further investigation is a little under 3%. Hispanics is actually underrepresented. So compared, again, both of these are compared to white children. So that's at that next level of accepting a report. After that, then an investigation occurs. At the investigation, then we find out, is there a finding of abuse and neglect? So here the numbers are looking a little different. So when we're looking at both black and Hispanic children, when the investigators then go out to investigate the home environment, talk to people, potentially examine the child, we're not seeing these disparities. It's almost a 1-on-1 ratio. So meaning that a family, a black family or a Hispanic family is likely to have a report once the investigation occurs, have a finding of abuse and neglect. That's for McLean County and also for Peoria. When we started this project, we were really going by numbers and percents. We weren't really doing the disparity ratios, but when we started this project, at every single point, there were disproportionate numbers of African American children. We weren't really tracking initially Hispanic children. The numbers in some of our areas were lower in Central Region, but now we are. So when we have these dialogues that Sam will lead us through, let's get into what is behind these numbers. So we're seeing that on some levels, black children are being screened in for further investigation, but then when they get to the actual evaluation of the home, not as much. But this has not been the case Now foster care entries. So after the investigation, if there's a finding of abuse and neglect, either the parents can be served with the child in the home or removed from the home if it's deemed too serious. Foster care entries for McLean County and Black and Hispanic. So Black children are about 1.5 times more likely to enter care compared to white children. And then Hispanics, again, being underrepresented, much less likely. And here's Peoria. Actually, both groups here are underrepresented. Any surprises in the room? Yeah.
I'm surprised because I've been watching this historically and that there are far more Black children in the last 5 to 8 years anyway in foster care in Peoria than there were white. So to see this is actually very encouraging.
Yeah.
Because of where we were coming from.
I'll be honest, me too. We track these numbers, and again, we started this whole initiative because there were these disparities across every aspect. But we're seeing now that not so much. Now again, we track this, but we want now to turn this information over to you to think about what's going on, what has changed, why are we, when the investigators go out and evaluate the home, or when they refer a family for in-home services, why, what is happening that we're actually seeing some hope here in terms of not seeing those disparities. Now, of course, we don't want any child to come into care, but something to have some dialogue here. The last piece I'm going to show you today is now I'm going to show you the data on the total number of children in foster care by race and ethnicity, looking at the same two groups. And these will represent whether they have been in foster care 1 day or 18 years. This is the total number of children that are in care, starting with Bloomington. And here is what you just mentioned. So an accumulation of children over time, when our kids come into care, they are not leaving. They're part of this number 7 times. So Black children in McLean County are 7 times more likely to be represented in foster care. So this is why we're seeing, as you mentioned, I'm sorry, tell me your name again.
Susan O'Neill.
Susan, Miss O'Neill. So that's why when you're saying, okay, we're seeing a lot of children, we are. We're not getting as many coming in compared to other children, but when they come in, look at the numbers. That's McLean. Peoria. 3 times more, 3.5 times more. Again, Hispanics being underrepresented. But still, Black children are 3.5 times more likely to be in the foster care system in Peoria. Any thoughts, comments? I just have one more slide on the data.
Why are Hispanic children underrepresented? What's the reasoning behind that?
You know, that's a question also that we're wanting to talk with community members about. Some people are suggesting, again, I don't have data on this, but because some Hispanic families, not all, might be dual status, some, you know, where there might be a reluctance to even call, or there are community resources. Maybe it's a little bit more insulated communities, but again, that is Those are some suggestions that have come out, but important to have those conversations as well. Any other thoughts on that? Now, I don't have the disparity index for the reunification, but I did want to also show the percentage of children that experience reunification. And as we can see, about 50% of those reunifications were among black children, black children. 31% white, Hispanic, and then we have others. That's for McLean. And then for Peoria, not too different. So just wanted to give you that snapshot today. Were some things surprising? And some things not so surprising. So the reason why we like to do this and show the data in this fashion is because it shows us really where the work needs to be done, right? So for whatever the reasons that through initiatives, through additional trainings, through accountability, we are in these two counties, again, each county looks different. In these two counties, we are not seeing those same levels of racial disparities on the front end. However, when we go back to those calls being made, you know what? That's a whole other issue. What is going on when essentially we saw law enforcement and the schools are those primary entryways where hotline calls are being made. Again, they are mandated reporters. But very few of those cases then are indicated, have a finding of abuse and neglect. So just ponder on what that is like for a family and for children when investigators are coming into the home and school, you know, many times going out to the schools, children being examined, etc. Are there some things here that can be addressed on that front end? What kind of partnerships can we have with those individuals who are making those calls? And then certainly in terms of children remaining in care, what kind of services are being offered? Are they culturally responsive services? What is the role of our court systems? Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Now, when you look at the numbers, are we saying that they're more like children than Hispanic children in terms of population?
You know, when we do those disparity index, part of the formula that we use is taking into account a calculation that includes the total proportion of the population. So that's why we get those, the index, because we do account for the population in the community.
And when you look at these numbers, are we looking at poverty in the black community as compared to other communities? Why there's many more black children in the system?
We have not compared that data looking at, again, poor white children versus poor black versus poor Hispanic. But when we look at child poverty, we do have data for child poverty altogether. Black and Hispanic families are, they're not very different, but we're seeing the numbers being much different.
And the reason why I ask is because as an investigator, I was an investigator for DCFS for a while, and most of the cases were because of poverty.
Yeah.
It's poverty that caused the calls and the children being involved.
And that's, you know, that is interesting. I have seen research that compares poor rural white families versus impoverished black families. And the reality is in some of the rural counties where there tend to be more poor whites, calls aren't being made. And even we did some initial focus groups when we started this, and we learned that in some of the rural courts, they are much more reluctant to even take a case. They still have a mindset that this is a family business, we don't want to get involved, or, believe it or not, the expense. In some of these in some of the smaller counties, the courts even talked about we don't really have the funds to be able to initiate the court hearings if it's, you know, in some of the smaller communities. So, you know, that is always the question to me. There are poor whites in urban, rural areas, but that is a good question. And then when you gather in the action team meetings, those are the kind of discussions, requests for additional information that we want to look at. So we're going, yes, one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
This is not necessarily a question, but possibly an observation. 3 things. Number 1, I like to move under the auspices that poverty does not equal neglect, but a person's bias may cause them to make a hotline report regarding someone who's poor.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah.
The second thing is that there's an issue with, especially in the state of Illinois, mandated reporter training. It's a very the idea and the way it reads, it seems a bit punitive, right? And it basically says you're a mandated reporter, and if you don't call a hotline in, if you suspect child abuse and neglect, you can be prosecuted.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
with that
serious.
type of wording, why would I risk my?
Right.
Okay.
Call in everything.
Yeah.
Call, you know, if the child comes with no socks on, or whatever the case may be. So these are the kind of things we want to have discussion. Can we work with our schools? That just think about 90% of the cases called in by schools, was that Bloomington or were not, there was not a finding of abuse and neglect. Are there some things we can do differently? We think about, as Lyman was talking earlier, are there some things where we can go deeper and not just around the edges to really have some transformational change here? Because these are all of our children. So, so Sam, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can take it from here on how we have some dialogue about these issues.
Great, so much. All right. So I'm going to start with an apology, maybe 2 apologies, and then I'm not going to apologize for what we do from now on while I'm up here. Okay? So the first apology is really not my fault. So what had happened was, and I think we got backed up on time a little bit, right? So I'm going to try to make up for that in what I do with you. That's the first apology. And then the second apology is, this is my fault, and this is in black and white, and it says Townhall meeting, okay? I thought it said workshop. So I brought some work for y'all. I'm sorry. All right. But that's it. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize anymore. And the reason that I'm not going to apologize is what I'm going to try to do, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to bring my whole damn self here, just for the next little bit of time. And I want to invite you also to bring all of you. So I'm going to ask you to do some things. It might be awkward, but they won't be difficult. And I'm going to ask you to move. I'm going to ask you to answer some questions. But I want to start with a particular approach, which is going to involve some work for you. Lyman and I spoke about a week ago. I was traveling, and he mentioned this book, and it's been on my list. So I said, "Ooh, let me get it." All right. So this is not a plug. Dr. Jenright is not paying either one of us no money to do this. But I do want to base some of what I say to you on this work. And there's so many things that I want to say to you, and I might be able to interject them as we go along. But in order for us to get started, here's what I want you to do. This is your first assignment. First, I want you to sit up straight in your chair. I want you to put your phone away. I want you to turn your computer away from you. Get your eyes out of the screen. Can someone turn that light out back there for a second? Let's see if we can get the lights out. You can put your hands on your thighs and push back from the chair. Take a nice sip of your water if you want. I'd like to invite you to close your eyes. I'm going to invite you to take a really nice deep breath. And the bad news is that you are going absolutely nowhere for 3 minutes. So you're sort of stuck here. I want you to take a couple of nice, really very deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Give yourself a moment to examine how your body feels. If you're like me, you're probably feeling a little bit of anxiety. Got so many things to do, but you're not going anywhere for the next 2 minutes. Just a couple of nice deep breaths, and to nourish yourself with the breaths that you take in. Give yourself just these 2 minutes, just to let yourself relax completely. To let go of all of the expectation, all of the pressure. Every breath that you take nourishes every cell in your body. This is a very simple, easy way of taking care of yourself in this moment. A couple more of just very, very deep breaths. You can scan your body and see if there's any tension in your legs, any tensions in your torso, if there's any tension in your shoulder, if you're holding any tension in your neck or in your head or in your chest. Let your eyes relax. Let your tongue drop to the floor of your mouth or the roof of your mouth or whatever feels comfortable. Just allow yourself to take really, really deep breath and just exhale and let yourself be present in the room. Bring all of yourself, all of your successes, all of your frustrations are welcome here, all of your genders, all of your confusions and conflicts, all of your accomplishments, all of your desires, everything about you, the way you look, the way you talk, where you're from, all the good stuff that's happened to you, all the bad stuff that's happened to you, all of that is welcome in this space. You are 100% welcome and invited to be here. We're happy that you are here. Just allow yourself just to relax. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I hate to turn the light back on. Many of you may know the work of Audre Lorde. One of her, you want to turn one of the lights on? Yeah, you can go ahead. Just so I can read. You might know the work of Audre Lorde. I swear I'm not going to lecture you. Just a little bit. But Audre Lorde was a really, really important black feminist writer, organizer, activist, and the last few years people have been using quote of hers, and this is a quote. "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence," wrote Audre Lorde in her 1988 book, A Burst of Light, which was written soon after she was diagnosed with cancer for a second time. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So I want to suggest to you that the 2 minutes that you just took, just to relax, just to care for yourself, that any time you do that, even if the house is on fire, honey, I'm going to sit here for a minute. I can't do nothing about that. All right? It's not self-indulgence, but it is an act of political warfare, and it is very important. Lyman was talking about this work of 4 pivots and the value of focusing on well-being and well-becoming. I just want to remind you of how important that is. Now, for your next assignment, this is going to be a little challenging because the space is not perfect for it. But what I want you to do is I want all of you to get up and make a real large circle around the space of this room. We can use the front. It's going to be messy. Push your chairs in. Get your stuff out of the way so that you can do this. We're going to do several little assignments like this, and we only have a couple of minutes to do them. So I want you to do that. There is strength and power in ease and relaxation. And when we are relaxed, we're able to connect with ourselves and also to connect with one another and to connect with a source of energy and power that is important, and it is a deep repository of our lived experience, connecting with our lives right here. Like I'm not that much of a religious man, but Jesus didn't go to a party. He went to the desert. And there's a reason that he took that moment, all right? So what I want to invite you to do right now is just, again, I want you to close your eyes. You can drop your hands at your side. There are probably going to be people that are peeking. They're going to look at you. All right, but just for like 15 seconds, I just want you to close your eyes and take another really, really deep breath. Okay? Now, in a few seconds, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. And when you open your eyes, what I want you to do is I want you to look around the room at all the people that are here and all the people that are here that are engaged in this struggle with you. And I've got another piece of really bad news. The other piece of really bad news is everyone who is out there, who's not in here, at your job, in your community, in your church, in your organization, they're all gone. And the only people that are going to be able to do something about racial disparities in foster care systems are in this room right now with you. This is your team. These are your soldiers, your co-conspirators. This is your group. So I want you to open your eyes, and I want you to look around the room, and I want you to look and see everybody that's here. How many women are here? How many white men are here? How many black women are here? There are a lot of social workers in the room. I want you to give yourself permission to look at every person, to look them in their face, to look at their shoulders, look at their lips, look at their eyes, look at their torso. Can't see their feet, but look, and then let yourself also be seen. Know that there are people everybody looking at you. Oh, you ain't that paranoid. People are looking at you. Just let yourself be seen. See people. Is there anybody in here, just by a show of hand, that knows everybody? Okay, so not everybody knows everybody. Are there people in here that there's someone that you don't know? Okay, almost everybody. Okay, this is your next assignment. This is a really difficult one. what I want you to do is I want you to keep looking, and I want you to look at a person that you don't know. And what you're going to do is, for your next assignment, you're going to go and find someone that you don't know, and you're going to complete your next assignment. So, here is, you know, like you do yoga, there's like a beginner's level, advanced, and everything. The beginner's level. Find somebody that you don't know. Okay? A little more advanced. Find somebody who you think might be very different than you, that you also don't know. A little bit more advanced, right? Like I, as a black man, might want to work with a white dude, or might want to work with a young dude, right? Different than me, right? Find somebody that's a little bit different than you. Number three, a little more advanced. Find somebody that you might have beef with, that you worked with before, that you ain't talked to, that you can work with. A little bit more advanced, all right? A little bit more advanced. That makes sense? Make sense? All right? So beginner, somebody I don't know, a little more advanced, someone who may be a little bit different than I am. Maybe they talk about what they did. They might look different. I think they might be different religiously, politically, in terms of gender, class, whatever. Or somebody that I've had some conflict with, or that I'd like to get over a hump with. Okay, you got 1 minute to do this, because I ain't got that much time. You got that much time.
Are we supposed to talk or just?
No, just connect with that person. Get with that person.
I don't know you guys.
Just get with that person.
All right, we need some rock.
Space for you and your partner. Find space for you and your partner.
Oh, yes. Nice to meet you.
You might find a threesome. You might find a threesome. Okay, listen up. Listen up. Listen up. Listen up. Here is your assignment. Here's your assignment with your partner. I'm cutting time here, so you're going to have to work a little smarter and a little harder. I want you, with your partner, to deal with these 4 questions. Who are you? What do you love? What is your gift? And how should we live together? And I want to put that in the context of you thinking about racial disparities in foster care, right? So who are you could be the perspective that you bring to the work. What's the perspective I bring as a black man that grew up in poverty, that's now educated, that's cisgender, right? I said all of that without saying what my title was, what my job is, right? Who are you, okay? Second thing is, what do you love? What drives me is connecting people. You can't tell that already, all right? What drives me is connecting people. I love that shit. All right, like I can go home and take the rest of the week off. Right? And I'll talk about this for years. Oh my God, I connected people. I made them meet each other. What do you love, and where do you get most of your joy when you think about confronting racial disparities? This is tough because you don't have anything to write with. Then the third one, this is really important. What is your superpower in terms of racial disparities? Okay. What is your superpower in terms of confronting issues of race? What is your superpower? And what is your kryptonite?
How many?
Right? What is your superpower? What is your kryptonite? And then finally, this question about how you shall live. I want to, try not to talk to you about too much. I want to let you know this is a fact. The happiest countries in the world are places where people contemplate their death. It's a part of their religious practice, right? Which is like saying, I ain't gonna be here too long, let me take care of this business, right? Which means that we are not gonna be in this room too long. So what do we wanna do and how do we wanna be with each other while we are in this room. We can bring all the stuff that we normally do, or we can decide to do something different. I'm going to take you through some exercises that are going to, I hope, to push you to do something different. Then I'm going to teach you 2 words that I really love. I just made them up. I don't know that I can spell it, but I'm going to write them down, all right? So, what do you love? Who are you? What do you love? What's your gift? What's your superpower? What's your kryptonite? And how do you want to live around the issue of racial disparity? So I want to do more work with women and girls with a feminist mindset that dictates the work that I do is both about self-care and care for other people, that includes values of inclusiveness and belonging and activism. That's how I want to live. That's what I've been working on for about a year. You got me? Yeah. That's the idea. Okay, you've got 4 minutes. Each of you get 2 minutes. So one person listens, and then you switch. All right? 4 minutes. Okay. Can I have your attention, please? All right. So that's the end of your 4 minutes with your partner. One more time, we talk a little bit about that. What I want you to do now is I want you to take your partner by the hand, and I want you to find another pair, so there should be a foursome. We got 1 minute. Alright, when you get into your foursome, so you've got 2 A's that met with each other, right? And 2 B's that met with each other. Okay. So let's get an A and a B and an A and a B in your foursome. You each get 1 minute. So 1 A-B pair, each of you get 1 minute, the other 2 people listen. Then the other A-B pair, you each get 1 minute, the other people listen. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense to me. I wonder if it makes sense. Okay, all right, so the idea, same questions. Yes, essentially the same questions, because the pair that were not in your pair don't know what your answers are, right? So you can share. Each pair share. Each pair share. All right.
So as we were saying,
each pair share. Okay. You've got 1 minute to do that. Here is a. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Right. Each pair share. So you're gonna listen for 3 minutes to other people. Abish? All right. You get 1 minute? Please. All right, that's your final minute. So you started sort of identifying for yourself who you are in relation to racial disparity, identifying your superpower, your kryptonite, also thinking about what do you love, how do you think we should live. So here's a question I want you to, anyone can sort of respond to this. When you heard about the gifts and the interest of your first partner, did it cause you to rethink your own gifts and interests and answers to these 4 questions?
no.
How many people say no? No. Okay, how many people say yeah, maybe? Any yeses? Okay, all right, fantastic. Okay, all right. Here is a. This is another. This is another part of the workshop. This one's a little bit challenging. What I want you to do is I want you to look at the people in your group. Look at them. I want you to pull out your phones. And we all exchange contact information. You get a piece of paper, write it down. I want you to have contact information from every person that was in your four-pair group, what do you call fours? Quad. You've got 2 minutes to do this. Every person that was in your group, get their contact information. Every person that was in your group, get their contact information. Everybody that was in your group, get their contact. See, if y'all were 16, y'all all have your phones on. I'll put your phones around, leave them in the person. Everybody that was in your group, get their contact information. Yes, you do. So one suggestion is write all the numbers down and take a photo. Or share your card. Everybody that was in your group. Everybody that was in your group.
370-00291. Don't have to forget, I get my personal cell because I can do it.
Got 1 minute left. Everybody that was in your group. Everybody that was in your group. Okay, then we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to let you get your lunch. All right? I am standing between you and your grumbling stomachs. All right. Here is the one more thing. I want you to take your group of 4 and go to a blank piece of paper and take a marker with you. And this is your last, maybe your last, almost your last. And there may not be enough markers, so let me give you a pen, take a pen. There are 6 of them up here.
There are plenty of 10s and 10s.
6 markers. Come get a marker. That's it. 6 markers. 6 markers. Okay, get in front of your group. So when you all get to where you are, then I'll give you your next instruction.
Sorry.
You can use, someone can use this sheet of paper.
I do, because I put my phone on my desk.
You haven't gotten part B instructions yet.
Find a place.
Thank you.
Take your other 3 people. Okay, are you all ready? Yep. Okay, so here's the word I want to introduce you to. After 20 years of doing public engagement work, I figured out what it is that I do. And actually what I would add to this is improvisation. Improvisational, rhizomatic, concatenating. And it sounds kind of fancy. I'll tell you what that is, all right? So you might know that like a blade of grass, right, actually doesn't grow like that, right? So blades of grass grow from what are called rhizomes, right? So underground, there are these roots, and these roots, the nodes of the root give birth to blades of grass. So you know when you dig up grass, you get a clump of grass, right? You don't get like one good, that'd be a really small space. You don't get like one little blade of grass. You get clumps of grass, and when you shake the dirt off, right, they're all connected, right? Like you all right now, right? And so then concatenating is linking things together, all right? So like if you take snow and you take ball, they're a little bit different. They're not the same thing. But if you put them together, you got a whole different thing, right? Snowball. That's concatenating, putting things together. One of the ways that we describe art is we say art is putting things together in interesting ways. That's all it is. You put together sounds together in interesting ways, and you say, "Oh man, that's a dope Beyonce song." All right, here's what I want you to do right now. Here's your last piece of work for me. At your piece of paper, I want you to think about. Here's how I wrote it. What I want you to think about in regards to racial disparities and your own work, who you are, what your gifts are, what your mission is, not your organization. You feel me? What you care about, what drives you, where you can be powerful, where you can be strong, where you can have an impact. Right? What I want you to think about with your group of 4, what possibilities are there for you and the members of your group, this 4, to develop collaborations, projects, allyships, to explore ideas like excited children. Oh my God, you know what we get to do? This 4, something you would love to do, something you would love to work on. With this 4, okay, you got 4 minutes. And then we'll do lunch. On this piece of paper with your group. Like, I met someone who works in a school, and I would love to work with school-age children. Or I would love to address how reports are made in school and reduce the number of indicated reports or the overall number of reports. And there's someone in my group that works with school. That make sense?
Does everybody have paper?
Yes, they have this.
Does everyone have a marker?
With your group of 4,
Does anyone need a marker?
what are the possibilities for collaborations with your group of 4? Maybe there's someone in your group that works with an organization that does something you'd like to learn more about. Or maybe there's an organization that you've never had a partnership with. You can establish a partnership with that organization. Maybe there's someone who's from a different city and you can connect the work from your different city. Does that make sense? That is the end of our 4 Okay, can I have your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? Maybe not. Can I have your attention, please? Okay, so we are going to.
Thinking about our action.
I said I wasn't going to make any more apologies, but I just want to point out that we started with this idea that being at ease and bringing your whole self into the space, being intentional about welcoming everybody in the space, seeing who is here, and making an intentional effort to reach out to people that you don't know, people who seem to be different than you are, and perhaps even people where there's a little bit of distance to bridge, is a really important place for us to start in terms of both sort of how we choose to live broadly, certainly in terms of how we choose to live in doing this really very important work. You met some people, you've given maybe some crazy people your phone number. I don't know why y'all did it, but you did it. You don't know who these people are. I was somewhere in some work about 25 years ago. It was some leadership development work at the U of I, and the 90 people in the room made the agreement. We didn't talk about sort of how we want to live together in this space, listening to each other, respecting each other. But that group of people made the agreement that they would only be one phone call, one text away. So I got a group of 89 names of people who said, all you have to do is text me or call me about anything related to what we were working on. That's pretty damn powerful. And here you are in a group of about 40 people with that same possibility and potential across the state of Illinois. That's pretty possible. When you talk about creating possibilities for this work, and power for this work, and momentum for this work, and allyship for yourself, for what you want to do, what you care about. This is a pretty powerful group of people to be connected with. I want to point out, without apologizing, that we've pushed pretty quickly through some work that takes a long time to develop, right? And if we had more time, we could look at what each of your groups have started, and we could work on that. And any of us could sort of make a list of all of the things related to racial disparity, right? Any of us in this room could do this, and from that macro level. But the idea that you have some compatriots that are someplace that are working on this same thing, that we can drill down into it and be very, very specific about what I need and what I'm doing and what I want and what you're working on, right? Right? I mean, that's the origin of human culture. Small gatherings, people connected around a particular purpose, right? On some level, that's movement work, right? That's civil rights, it's women's rights, it's anti-war, small group of people connected around a purpose, and that's really powerful, energetic work. So I'm between you and your lunch. I'm sorry, I told Danica that I would stop, but she knows you can't give me a microphone. But thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Wait. Hey, we can see. The rest of the day is yours after we get I want to ask if each of you, let's break for lunch, but can you write your names on the sheets you were working on? I'm going to take a snapshot of each and get those typed up and send out. But if you can please put the names of your team, and we'll get those typed up and sent back to you.
A science fiction writer, one of the early black science fiction writers, and she is the author, one of the authors of this work that we call Afrofuturism. How many of you know that term? How many of you saw Black Panther? Yeah. So Black Panther is in some ways an Afrofuturist vision. How do we envision black people in the future? You know, a whole lot of science fiction doesn't have a vision of black people in the future. And oftentimes, when we envision black children, black families, we begin with where we are, right? And we follow that trajectory. But there is the possibility of thinking about a different vision for us in the future. And that is this work that is called Afrofuturism. And on some level, I would suggest that your work of meeting and connecting with one another here and thinking about a possible future of relationship, of engagement around this issue is an opportunity, is a portal. There's a young black female, queer female named Adrienne Marie Brown. And Adrienne is the author of some work and a book that is called Emergent Strategies. And this work is about how do we not only envision a different future, but what are some strategies that we use in order to practice building a different future. So there was an example that came up in looking at the high level of reports that come from schools. And the suggestion was, what is it that schools can do in addition to or instead of calling in a report to DCFS? Some of that work could be, as Lyman is suggesting, how do we create communities that nurture and care for children and families? How do we do that consciously? How do you do that consciously in your own work and in your own life? Create opportunities for deeper care of people that you can have impact on. Anyway, one of the things that Adrienne Marie Brown says in her book, Emergent Strategies, is that whenever you're with a group of people, there is a conversation that only that group of people can have about that topic or that focus. It's almost as if each of you or each of us are in a particular place and have a particular contribution and a particular jewel to give to this work that another group of people may not have. And the task for us here is to figure that out. Like if I told you that there's somebody in this room and they have a $100 bill in their pocket with your name on it, and all you got to do is figure out who that is, and that $100 bill is yours. So this idea that there's only a conversation that folks in this room can have, and that is a really important conversation. So I don't know where you would like to go now with the work that we just did together. I have a suggestion, which is I could start at each of these set of ideas. The folks who began the ideas could sort of introduce them and talk about them. And then those of you that were not with this group could offer suggestions to further develop that set of ideas. Or even better, for example, like it says here, support groups, I could say, oh, you know what? I have a master's in developing support groups, and here's my number. I'd love to help with that as a possibility. So that's one possibility. We can start and we can go from poster to poster and look at these ideas as a larger group. That's one idea. What would you like to do now besides finish lunch?
I like the idea of the poster thing.
You like the idea of doing the poster thing? You can say no.
What was the other option?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking you. What's the other option? What is the other option? What would you like to do?
I prefer open dialogue.
Okay.
That's just me. Because we all in here different departments and different, see things differently. But that's just me. Just the open dialogue.
And those things are not necessarily exclusive. Okay, another idea of what we might do with the next few minutes. Okay, all right, so I really like this idea of open dialogue as well. Does anyone have a question? Or how about this? What did you hear? What did you experience? What excites you? What did you hear that was of interest? What did you experience? What now excites you? Yes, and say your name please so people know who you are.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I am excited because I didn't know there were all these people in my region, right here in the central region, that are working on the same things that we've been talking about in different groups, whether it's the Racial Justice and Equity Commission, the NAACP, the problem-solving courts that I work in. We're all having these conversations, but this is such a wealth of knowledge and experience in here that that's what makes me excited and very happy.
Yes. What's your name?
Michelle.
Okay.
Michelle from Baby Fold. My new position there is Permanency Achievement Specialist, and it's a new position introduced by the department to private agencies to help work primarily in the adoption portion of it. But I'm wondering, based on some of the conversation that our group had, where could Permanency Achievement Specialists grow and expand to address issues of permanency going back into the home, permanency addressing some of the areas of services that aren't provided to families who then find themselves in the predicament of having their children removed. So how can we take permanency achievement, instead of just kind of putting it into an adoptions category, and turn that more into a front-end position that helps address how we can permanently return these children to their homes?
Sounds like you got some resonance with that question. Does anybody want to take that, respond to that question in any way? The question is, Suzanne? Michelle is starting a new position with Baby Fold that is a permanency-focused position. That focus is on adoption as a permanency option. And she is wondering about other efforts to include permanency, a permanency option that returns children to their family of origin.
I think that the caveat to it is that the role was presented to private agencies with no definition around it, so there's room to grow and develop that position. So it's kind of a blank slate at this point in time. So, you know, like was said, I like the idea that there's so many people that are in the room that have different opportunities to provide that input to that. So if there is a sign-up sheet that goes around with names and numbers, I'll probably be calling some of you. So.
You responded to this.
Yes, I think it's important as you look at the children in care. We all know they want to go back home. They all say it, I want to go back home. And so I think if we're looking at transformative justice, then we can transform the system and try to get these kids back home and into the care of their families, because they're going to do better there. And the research already proves it out. So it's not rocket science. So that should be our goal.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I'm just gonna be frank here. I don't know anything else to do. What got me excited was the fact
Bob.
I was in the group with, Andrew was my partner, my first partner.
Who's Andrew? Okay, all right.
And so Andrew works at a juvenile detention center for the county.
Yes.
But what even got me more excited, that Andrew is a white man that wants to.
White men excite me too.
Can't help us. That wants to learn, number one, and understand, okay? But he also wants to provide interventions that not only will help him and the children that he works with in the facility, but to also become a guide, so to speak, or, you know, for other facilities as well as making changes. What I see when I talked to Andrew was, because I work with racial disproportionality, is that how many children, number one, are connected to Andrew and me with the Juvenile Detention Center and DCFS, that's number one. Number two is, how many of those, how does the racial demographics or the racial disproportionality mirror in the juvenile detention facility that of the community and that of the state? And with that being stated, how can Andrew and I work together to move the children that he works with into the community to have service provision between Michelle and Jerry, because they provide services in the community. Because I believe that if we look at the demographics, Andrew's kids there are a high number of Andrew's kids in the juvenile detention facility that are also connected to DCFS.
Right. So that was, I would say that's rhizomatic, right? That you found, and that was also part of what Lyman's approach was, is looking across systems for connections, right? And Andrew, are you connected with Juvenile Redeploy? There's one in your community. So I think this is an area that I am especially interested in. But I think there's some real potential, even just for you and Andrew, to get together and to have this conversation about what happens in child welfare and what happens in juvenile justice. And if you begin to bring one or two other people into that conversation, that is also really already very powerful. Very, very powerful. Very powerful work. And one of the places that Doris and I got started, back when this was getting started, we did a action group convening and planning in Decatur, Illinois. And we were there talking about overrepresentation of black children in foster care. At the same time, there was a group in Macon County that was beginning to do work around disproportionate minority contact, is what they called it, in justice, right? Those two groups were not talking. And that's probably true in the places where you are from. That those two groups, which have children and families, neighborhoods, sources of funding, policy, are not communicating with each other like you all did today in that brief conversation.
But the best thing about that is the fact that we have a director that came from...
That's exactly right.
That's exactly right.
And that's a great opportunity for this work to connect with juvenile justice, because that's where her roots are.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. That's a really good example of why just even 5 minutes with each other to say, what are you doing, what are you working on, where are you from, breeds opportunity. This is really important work. Lyman talked about part of our approach is being siloed in our agencies, in our organizations, in our jobs, and that when we can do work that brings us out of those silos, that is really very, very important. Other comments, ideas, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I actually came a little bit discouraged at first, because I feel like you go to these meetings and nothing changes. You know, we all get together, throw our ideas around, and that's the end of it. But I thought this was wonderful because it's very different. There were different people in the room, especially from DCFS, which is wonderful because a lot of times we sit things that in other spaces than when we had community meetings to try to understand. And today I just feel so much better than doing it, because I was almost like, I can't do this anymore. It just gets tiresome,
And what's your name?
Chantel.
How do you spell it?
SHONTELLE.
All right.
And
So,
today, Janae actually said something that was important that she shared over there. I don't want to share my other story, but I feel like people have to be privy to mine. But to see somebody that was where she had come from, to see her where she is today, is the real outcome of wanting to see these young people. They got an opportunity to be somebody. They want to be with their families. Come from Chicago, where I come from, is looked at so different. I think that's it plays into like somehow how they were raised and what you see. And I had run into my colleagues talking about how, whereas where I come from, it be looked at different, right? How I would look at it. My mother let us play outside. The neighborhood looked out the one that was so different compared to today. And you try to make no judgment because that mandate, word mandate, is triggering for me because when you talk to someone and you ask them, you know, I had an issue that happened with a client that the case was closed. And somebody else in another agency called DCFS for the same thing that it was closed on. And that, I mean, it made it upset me because it's just like, everybody said don't make it personal, but it is. Like, you just re-traumatized my client, and I trusted you as another agency. And I'm going to talk about it, and I think that's what I'm going to be vocal about because it's just not right. Especially when the children are home, so the same exact thing. And we looked at things they could have done, and they want to go and done. But I feel so much better now with the people I've met and connected with, so I'm glad. And I'm always, Doris, whenever you do numbers, I love when you do the numbers, because you say the exact same thing without even looking at it, what's happening, because that's how I look at it. The numbers of the school and the police, and I say it all the time, you know, and then when you put up your numbers, everything in me just be like, exactly what I'm just talking about, exactly what I just said, that, you know, I'm just glad somebody like you that has the number to put stuff out there so it speaks to it, and now I can actually say the same thing I've been saying, because everybody wants you to have proof. But it doesn't take that when you just look around you and you see it and where it's coming from, and I knew that. And I just felt vindicated in that thing, because it's exactly the same thing I talk about all the time.
So I got, maybe this might be my next to last assignment for you all, right? But we talk about building communities and supporting families. So I'm going to tell you that when somebody that's in our crew gives an indication that they could use encouragement and us to wrap around them, so what's our response to that? Right? So y'all need to bum rush the sister. Am I right? Yeah. Right? Before she leaves, before you leave, just shake her hand, make sure she has your number, and that you're willing to stand with her, even if you can only do a little bit. Even if all you can do is say, call me, send me an email, and I'll do my best to be responsive to you. Right? That's building an inclusive, belonging, supportive community, because then we can do better care for our children and for our families when we got each other based on that.
And you know, if I could say, you raised a great point, Sam, which is as we are here because we're invested in our children and our communities, we need the support.
Absolutely.
This work is tiring. And honestly, the fact that we started in 2008, that's something to be proud of. With the highs and lows and folks changing, leadership, budget cuts, but we are still here. But in the meantime, Chantel, like you said, we need our cups filled. We need to know that we have people uplifting us so we can continue this work. Chantel, you are with what agency?
Oh, FSC, Family Community.
Family Community, that's right.
And where? Here?
In Bloomington.
In Bloomington. All right. So just to model, here's my email address. Here's my cell phone number. You can email me. You can call me anytime. Don't worry about overloading me, because my phone has an off and on button. So I know how to turn it off, and I know how to get back to people when I can get back to them. But I earnestly invite you, for any reason, to feel free to drop an email, send me a text, give me a call, because I know that my work is potentially better being connected with you than it is being disconnected from you. That's what I believe. And I also know how to turn my phone off. So anyway, I'm going to stop there, because I think any other before you go, so you don't get home and say,
We do have some closing.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just...
Would you say your name again and where you are so people know?
Hi, I'm Joan Hartman, and I'm with the Center for Human Services, the Mental Health Center over in Bloomington. And I also teach in the peer program at Heartland Community College. What my question is, to take back, and you don't have to answer it today, how can we be there? We're not like part we're part of the child welfare system, but we're kind of on the periphery of it. How can we be more supportive? How can we be more helpful? How can we show up more?
See, Joan, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that is a gathering wherever you are with however many number of people you can get. So we've already identified 3 systems, right? Mental health, child welfare, and juvenile justice. And we know that these systems are not communicating well. And not only are the systems not communicating well, but the individuals that are working with common children, common families, common neighborhoods, common issues are not connected and communicating so that you can answer that question, right? So this, I believe, is really very important work. Lyman works for an organization, and they've done some work at the Casey Foundation. They've done some work under the heading of, it's a funders organization that serve youth, like YTFG, where the Y and the F and the G stand for Youth Funding Group. I don't remember what the T stands for. But one of their recommendations is that we begin to develop other areas for research and practice. So a beautiful question and an easy question is, how can I work well with people that might be working with common children and common families in the same neighborhoods, the same issues across mental health, child welfare, and youth justice. And it would be beautiful just to take 3 or 4 people to lunch where you are and have that, especially if they're new people like you did today, and have that conversation, would be new work and important work and beautiful work. So that would be my answer is, there are people here in juvenile justice, there are people here in child welfare. You can find 2 or 3 people here that you can begin that conversation with. I'm going to stop.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
So
thank
we're
you all
about
so
to
much.
do some wrap up and next steps. I do want to, Janae is going to say a couple words, and then we have some next steps from our action team leaders. But Joan, to your point, going back to these areas that are the underlying conditions that expose our families to the foster care system, and then also oftentimes are preventing them, our children, from returning home. Every single one of these, and mental health is a core area. Mental health, domestic violence, incarceration, many of those underlying factors is where we really need those partnerships. Because when those services aren't there, and when they're not culturally responsive, beyond just, we're going to write a court report, they didn't show up, but that we have agencies and providers that are engaging with our families. That's why we loved our family advocacy centers. They were created, and CHS as community-centered agencies to work with the community to help support families in their struggles and if they're distressed. So all of these areas, we need people at the table who represent each of these areas. So with that, Dejanay, she's got to head back to Chicago, so she wanted to say a few words, and then our team, our Bloomington and our Bloomington and Peoria team leaders will give us some next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Houston. I didn't have much to add other than this was a great opportunity for us to partner and connect and start our next steps for what we see. We like to see race equity work go for the state of Illinois and the children that we serve in our respective spaces. I had an opportunity to check into a group in the back, and I started looking around, and I seen that for about how many DCFS folks that were here have always connected to something. So I got JDC on this wall, I got JDC on that wall, and the group I was in. So Juvenile Detention Center, acronyms. Peoria Juvenile Detention Center. And it appears that we had 3 conversations happening in those spaces. That was like very light bulbish for me, right? And in our particular group, Hannah talked about, Hannah, raise your hand. Today's your first day, Hannah?
Yeah, it's
Today is Hannah's first day. So, for Hannah's first day, she really got engaged in this discussion. And her conversation, something that folks at DCFS are very familiar with, when parents do not have the supports to navigate their child and cannot come back home from the juvenile detention center, which used to lead to a lot of hotline calls being made to the department to figure out how to help those kids get placed. But one of the things that our racial equity person that was sitting in that space, Lindia, said was family preservation. It was like light bulb. So when I thought about Lyman talking about well-becoming, like well-being is a state, well-becoming is a process. It keeps on changing every time we grow, we learn, we get some more experiences, that changes. And it was interesting to find out how well-being is just an important factor at the Peoria Detention Center, like it is at DCFS. Yeah. Why are we not working together? Why are we in this silo? So what we do? We done passed our information out. We done start sharing, invite them to come work on our C-Work group. This is what the work really looks like, right? Having those discussions and those conversations and seeing where we can really align our work, because nobody's doing anything by themselves in that silo. If we do not come together as a group, we'll be that cartoonish thing that tinkering, making something up, doing something innovative that look like the last thing we've been doing for the last 25 years, right? That's what it'll look like. And so I challenge us today to walk out of here feeling invigorated. This work is hard. I tell my staff that all the time. And I don't mean that because I can just say the work is hard. It's hard to convince people that we're really trying to do something for a group of folks that really need our help, right? Some of those folks most often look like me, right? And I really want to help. Hannah, I don't know. Chantel said it. Because I'm a lived expert, so I have an experience with the system as well. I understand how the system works also from both sides, from this side and from being the parent side. So I get a chance to stand in this space and feel confident in everything I'm saying because I know how the system works. Right? It's not a personal thing. It's about how do I help other families, because I had what we don't decide to call it, but I'm going to call it today for black folks. I have privilege. I have the privilege to know the resources that I need to reach out to help me navigate a system. That's something that some of our families do not have, right? And so we have to be cognizant of how we use our privilege and not our bias to help support these families. I'm going to end with this because I think this was so important, and I'm going to stop because I know it's probably going over the time you gave me. I apologize. I said it was going to be quick. As I thought about the justice space, just recently I received an email from the director who informed us that DCFS was going to be included in the governor's soon-to-be created, it's been created at this point, Justice Cabinet. And the purpose of this proposed Justice Cabinet is to elevate and coordinate the interagency work dedicated to deflection, diversion, re-entry, and transformation. This cabinet will take a comprehensive restorative approach to justice where Illinoisans are not overly incarcerated and have the opportunity to access the health and human services they need to thrive. The reason why I share that with you today is because we in Child and Family Services, that's about justice. You see how we can't sit in that one space and say we're trying to do a thing? We got to be able to get ourselves in all these spaces where it matters. And so I lead with that. I invite my Peoria Juvenile Detention Center folks to be a part of the work that we're doing in Illinois and at DCFS. And I invite everybody else to sit in this room to also engage with us, because we are open door policy. We let everybody in. We don't help. Thank you all.
Did everybody sign in when they came in and leave their email? We'll send out that distribution list if you did. Who didn't get to sign in? Anybody? Okay, we'll get those sent out along with the notes. So I want to thank you, and we want to hear next steps from Linda and Belinda, and also from Joan and Jerry, because they will be leading the two teams for both, one for Bloomington, and then the one for Peoria in Peoria. And I want to say I'm just thrilled So, you know, when we started this planning, we had a short window of time, and we were, you know, people were saying, are we gonna get people to care and wanna come out? But you all did, and we thank you. As Jackie comes up, we do have 2 more forums, May 6th. It's in the program book. Decatur and Springfield, that will be in Springfield. And then May 20th for Champaign and Danville, that one will be in Champaign. So if you're interested or you're doing some statewide work and want to join us for those remaining forums, we'd love to have you. And we're going to turn it over to our president of BACW to close us out.
I am so pleased regarding the outcome of today's town hall meeting. Pretty much you guys have come together. I mean, we have such a diverse group here, but all with the same cause. And you've done so much work. You know, I was working the room. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be in here the whole time because we were being interviewed by local media here. And I wanted to let them know about the action teams. I talked a lot about the action teams, so look at TV tonight and hopefully it'll be on there. But what I really want to say is what you've done here today, you know, is so important, and it's also going to give BACW and CABSW an opportunity to go back and ask for additional funding. There is so much racial equity funds out there now, and now that Dr. Johnson and I know how to write it, you know, we're going to go back, but we're going to use what you have shared with us today to be a little bit more detailed in terms of trying to get some programs in the Central Region community-based programs, funding for those programs so we can support our families and children in Central Region. And once again, I just want to thank all of you for your time. I know you're so busy. I used to work with DCFS, and I know child welfare, and I know how it's like. Once 8:30 hits, next thing you know it's 5 o'clock. So I just want to thank you again for coming in, and you will hear from us. This is just the beginning, you know. And we got where we are going. Okay, we are going to, and we're going in a path for change in child welfare. So be safe. Thank you for coming. Thank you.